Peter B. Collins, News and Comment. It's Monday, January 23rd, 2017. I am buoyed by the millions of people, largely women, who marched against the pussy grabber in cities across the country, nearly 750,000 in Los Angeles alone, 500,000 or more in Washington, and it was not confined to these shores. Not confined to that hallowed American soil, and I am thrilled to see it. Lots to talk about today in the News and Comment podcast, and I want to begin with a programming note. I have canceled the experiment that I started at the beginning of January, dividing the podcast into two parts. I had some theories that it might make it easier for people to access the second half of the podcast, and it might actually, increase the number of people who listen all the way through. But it proved to be annoying to many people, and not a single person emailed and said, "Hey, Peter, this is great. This is just what I've been looking for." So I listen to my listeners, and today you get a single podcast of approximately 30 minutes, and that's how we will continue to do it. I do have a new idea, though, that I'm going to experiment with, and this Friday at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, I'm going to launch a Facebook Live event around the recording of Friday's podcast, and we'll see where that goes. I think Facebook Live has been doing some interesting things. It's an interesting way for independent operators like me to access a large platform, and we're going to try it out and see how it goes. So, as I said, I am absolutely thrilled that so many people put on those pink knit pussy caps and showed Donald Trump that they are not intimidated by his misogyny, that they are, in fact, offended by the pussy grabber comment that leaked out during the campaign, and the general misogynist nature of his nearly all-male, all-white billionaire and millionaire cabinet. Now, this was an unfocused protest, and I don't have any problem with that. It was originally planned to celebrate the inauguration of Hillary Clinton as the first female president. And when they had to shift gears, well, they turned it into a celebration of women who oppose Trump. Now, I do give the corporate media credit because part of this is their payback to Trump. Part of it is the desire to grab bigger ratings. But the corporate media covered these marches where they did not cover many important marches in the past. And I saw live screens where there were 4, 5, 6 different windows. Portland, Oregon, Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, and many other cities outside the United States. And the problem I have with the corporate media is that they focused on celebrities. So when Madonna made her, I think, ill-advised comments about how she felt like blowing up the White House, but she won't. And when we heard Ashley Judd rant on about being a nasty woman, a vulgar woman, well, those don't really play well as sound bites, and they give opponents a lot of ammunition to use against the people who so proudly and peacefully protested on Saturday. And so I believe in free speech, and Madonna and Ashley can say whatever they want. But I was really struck that Angela Davis gave a great and brief speech at the Washington rally, and it was ignored by the corporate media. No quotes in the New York Times, no reference to the fact that she was there, and if there was any reference to her, she was shown speaking but with the sound off. So what did Angela Davis have to say? She said, "We recognize we are collective agents of history, and history cannot be deleted like web pages. We know that we gather this afternoon on indigenous land, and we follow the lead of the First Peoples, who, despite massive genocidal violence, have never relinquished the struggle for land, water, culture, their people. We especially salute today the Standing Rock Sioux." Later she said, "No human being is illegal. The struggle to save the planet, to stop climate change, to guarantee the accessibility of water from the lands of the Standing Rock to Flint, Michigan, to the West Bank and Gaza. The struggle to save our flora and fauna, to save the air, this is ground zero for the struggle for social justice." And she mentioned things that might have offended some of the more conservative women who were there. But some of it was drawn from the template of the Bernie Sanders campaign. Angela Davis said, "We salute the fight for 15. We dedicate ourselves to collective resistance. Resistance to the billionaire mortgage profiteers and gentrifiers, to the healthcare privateers, to the attacks on Muslims and immigrants, to the attacks on disabled people. Resistance to state violence perpetrated by the police and through the prison industrial complex. Resistance to institutional and intimate gender violence, especially against trans women of color. Women's rights are human rights all over the planet." Now, did you just pick that up? Angela Davis was essentially quoting Hillary Clinton. That is full circle. And that is why we say freedom and justice for Palestine. We celebrate the impending release of Chelsea Manning and Oscar Lopez Rivera. But we also say free Leonard Peltier, free Mumia Abu-Jamal, free Assata Shakur. The next 1,459 days of the Trump administration will be 1,459 days of resistance. Resistance on the ground, in the classrooms, on the job, in our art, and in our music. Thank you, Angela Davis. I find that pretty inspiring. Now, it is fair to say that women who voted for Trump, women who are pro-life, and others who are not part of a general moderate to liberal female population were not really welcomed to the event in Washington. Now, to a lesser extent, I think the same message applied in individual cities around the country, but not in any exclusive way. So the right wing is seizing on an article that the New York Times published, authored by a woman named Asra Nomani. She is Muslim. She describes herself as liberal and a feminist, but she used to write for the Wall Street Journal, and she freely acknowledges that she voted for Trump. So she explains why she didn't feel welcome there. As someone who voted for Trump, I don't feel welcome, nor do many other women who reject the liberal identity politics that is the core underpinning for the march, so far making white women feel unwelcome, nixing women who oppose abortion, and hijacking the agenda. Now, I think this is bullshit, because it was clear who organized this march and what their agenda is. Resistance to Trump centered around women's activism. And so for this woman to call herself a liberal feminist and then reject that, well, I'm sorry, it doesn't ring true. So then she goes on in what I would call bogey mansplaining. I think I've coined a new term here. Mansplaining, of course, is when a woman condescendingly tells a man how stupid he is. And so this is bogey mansplaining. And I've linked to her article, which has another link to her database, which shows that she says 56 of the march's partners, including key partners like Planned Parenthood and the National Action Network, that's Al Sharpton's group, and the American Civil Liberties Union, Center for Constitutional Rights. She says all these people get money from George Soros. So I can then infer that George Soros was in charge of this whole operation, set the agenda for it, and this is the kind of right-wing mania that occurs all the time. And I hear Rush Limbaugh as he bashes liberals and blames them for things that they couldn't possibly have caused. And so this is consistent with that. Now, George Soros is a complicated guy. And to the extent that he supports nonprofits that I support, I'm glad he's willing to give them money. To the extent that he imposes any agenda on them, which I don't impute as automatic just because they take money from Soros, I reject that. But this is guilt by association that doesn't prove a damn thing. And it's kind of par for the course. I would also note that the coverage in the media was interesting to me for a number of reasons. And Mark Crispin Miller, the professor of media and other stuff at NYU, went on Facebook and commented something that I was thinking about. Because the corporate media has said that this is one of the largest protests ever. But they ignore what happened on February 15th of 2003, when I, and perhaps you, and more than 10 million people worldwide marched and protested in opposition to the impending U.S. invasion of Iraq. And the media ignored us. They undercounted our numbers. They wouldn't allow the speakers who gave riveting comments to be heard in the media. And so, because this was not explicitly a peace march, and many women embrace a peace agenda, not all, the media, I guess, felt, well, it's anti-Trump, it's not pro-peace, so I guess this is safe enough, we can cover it. By the way, Mark Crispin Miller got some mansplaining back in his face just for making that comment. So Dick Adley, who is a very bright, dedicated listener to the Peter B. Collins podcast, and thank you for your subscriptions, Dick, I appreciate that. He notes that late last November there was a march which drew 20 million people. These were Shia Muslims who were marching in opposition to the Islamic State. Now, there are complex factors here about the Shia-Sunni divide, but fundamentally, 20 million people went on a march. And we always hear that there are no moderate Muslim voices who combat the Islamic radical terrorism that Donald Trump so courageously mentioned in his inaugural address. But Dick says you probably don't know about that march. He says, I didn't know about it other than an article in The Independent from Britain. Getting 500,000 people to march in Washington was not an inexpensive undertaking. How was it financed? As far as I know, Muslim pilgrimages aren't financed by NGOs with wealthy donors behind them. On that note, Dick, I would say that's an open question because I think that the Saudis fund a lot of expressions like this, and the Emirates are often behind the funding of other Muslim operations. So I don't know, but I question that comment. And Dick goes on, it was good to see Americans at last getting out in the streets about something. And as I say, their concerns are undeniably valid. But there are a lot of American-based horrors going on in the world that have been unleashed by the same establishment that's screaming about Trump. It can safely be said that these horrors would have gotten worse had the election gone the other way. Yet I didn't see those being addressed by either the march or the media, and there undoubtedly would not have been a march if Trump had lost. Well, he did lose, but Dick says I won't beat that not dead horse at this point. He goes on, I could be wrong, but it seems to me that yesterday reflected a heavy dose of months of hysterical and political and media manipulation, of which most of the well-meaning participants were unaware. A lot of people will undoubtedly be taking me or anyone else to task for raising this issue, accusing us of being conspiracy theorists or Trump supporters, just as many who expressed clearly documented concerns about Hillary during the primaries were labeled misogynists. Neither could be further from the truth. But that's the world we live in. Thank you, Dick. I appreciate that. And while we're mentioning a listener and a subscriber, let me do my daily pause here to thank the people who support my work with your subscriptions. And let me note that over the weekend, 3 people who had been long-term listeners with annual subscriptions decided not to renew. And that is their choice. I'm not going to call out Susan or Ted. Let me instead thank them for their support in the past. And I invite others to step up. Maybe it's your turn to help fund the Peter B. Collins podcast. You got an extra $5 a month you can part with? That's the minimum I would ask for. And if you've got a good income and money in the bank, go for it. 10 or 20 bucks a month would just make my heart sing. And I need new subscribers to step up and support. Some of it I think is inevitable turnover, and some of it I think is because of the strong opinions I express. So let me identify Linda Gray, Craig Baylog, Steve Wazensky, and Judy Holloway. They're all monthly subscribers to this podcast, and I invite you to join them. Come on over to peterbcollins.com. Wherever you're coming from, you click on the menu button. It pulls down. You click on Become a Subscriber. That takes you to the sign-up page. In just a couple of minutes, you're all set to go, and I thank you for your support. Last week, I did a Facebook post, and I made some comments warning protesters to be concerned about government surveillance when they attend protest marches, like on Friday or Saturday. Friday, by the way, we had great turnout here in Marin County, California, where hundreds of people marched from 2 points to the city center for a rally at the community center. I applaud our Democratic Congressman Jared Huffman and other elected officials who joined the effort. Huffman pointedly refused to attend Trump's inauguration, and he spent the day in his sprawling district helping Habitat build a home, doing other positive things, and also helping to rally the resistance. So I mentioned that I had offered some cautionary comments that if you walk around with your cell phone turned on in a protest, that you are subject to monitoring by Stingray. And a couple of listeners emailed and said, Peter, I think that even if your phone is turned off, they can track you. Well, we have an expert, a listener who works inside the surveillance community. And I'm going to call this person Benny. For years, I have imagined that there's an NSA employee who is tasked with monitoring the ravings of Peter B. Collins, and I named him Benny, and every once in a while I say, "Hi, Benny." So we'll use Benny as the name for this principled individual who decided to offer a corrective to my comments. And Benny first said, right now, the average citizen has over a 75% chance of being surveilled in some way. Cell phones, laptops, desktop units can and do record or photograph. Your cell phone is the treasure trove as far as location, preferences, history, associations, and it's used to rate you as far as a threat. Same thing for personal computers. Street, road, toll, bridge, tunnel, drone, and global tracking is also in the mix for the average citizen. And Benny went on to email a little bit later. I wanted to add a few things about Stingray. First, the technology is generally used in a target area, meaning it's utilized where the agency wants to get cell information or a target person. Stingray will pick up phones in that targeted area, and then they can and will sift through what phone they want by an ID number of the phone. Stingray will trick the phone to it as the strongest tower and preferred tower nearby. And to clarify the on-off issue, agencies have the technology to turn cell phones and other devices on from an off status. I have heard that other tracking technologies like Stingray, and Dirtbox is a common equivalent or competitor to it. She said Stingray has the ability to activate and capture cell phones. So I should have clarified that trackers can capture a cell phone that is off, but the first step of the operation is to reactivate the phone to on and then capture the ID number. Most trackers are used in specific ways, such as known drug house, protest location, or an area where the user will employ the signal as they want the users in a target area. That's how they go fishing and can narrow down. That's how they can go fishing and narrow down the phones and users. The average citizen is not likely to be surveilled this way, as the trackers are used for a specific fishing expedition, though you can get caught up in the net, so to speak, as if there's a major drug distributor in your proximity and they have their phone and you're there. If the police are doing surveillance, they will capture your phone too. Lastly, your cell phone gives your location every time it connects to a tower. Law enforcement can use the pattern of tower pings to develop targets. So if you're a person of interest to them, they can and will generate the target areas and then can employ a tracker. So, Benny, I want to thank you for this detailed insider information from the operations side of the surveillance state and these gizmos that we commonly call Stingray. I also want to note that I was appalled. Last night I was making some dinner and I flipped on the TV. I said, I guess 60 Minutes is coming on. And I forgot there was an NFL playoff game. Congratulations to the Packers. I guess they beat the Falcons and then they get to play the Pats. Okay, fine. Then they said, stay tuned for the premiere of the new CBS show called Hunted. Well, Hunted is a show that normalizes domestic surveillance. It is staged as a reality show where a group of contestants are competing to win $250,000. They're given 1 hour warning that they have to go on the lam, and they're allowed to pick up $500 from ATMs in $100 grabs, but they know, of course, that tips off the hunters to their location. The show is called Hunted, by the way. And so I watched this aghast because the people who play the game. They know where security cameras are. They look up and see the bubble. They know how quickly the fake cops who work for the show can find them. The show has a panel of people who used to work for the FBI and the CIA who are their fake hunters. They're like bounty hunters. And I just think this is flatly bizarre to make a game out of normalizing the surveillance operations run by our government and by private interests in this country. And that's how we open the Trump era. It is shocking. Now, Trump's relation with the media, relationship, he kind of called it a long-running war over the weekend. And Trump is displaying the kind of paranoia that I saw Richard Nixon show when he was president. Nixon had his own war with the media. He tried to blame them for the Watergate scandal. And so Trump is really replaying that in ways that are too similar to the extent that I find them frightening. So on Friday night at one of the inaugural balls, the Donald said, my enemies want me to stop tweeting. What do you think? Well, the people who paid thousands of dollars to dress up and go to a ball for Donald Trump, you think they're going to tell him to stop tweeting? And then at the CIA on Saturday, a completely bizarre and off-base performance where he stands in front of the wall of the fallen CIA officers and talks about his personal gripes that the media didn't give him credit for the millions and millions of people who came out to his inauguration. But the evidence is clear to any naked eye that his crowd wasn't very big, that there weren't people at certain points along the parade route. Hotel rooms were not all full. The Metro showed far less activity on Friday than it did on Saturday by a factor of 3. And so Sean Spicer, I believe, and this is pure speculation, but I watched as he was sent to the White House press room, and he read a script that I really felt was dictated by Donald Trump. I could be wrong, but that's how it felt. And Spicer lectured the media on their unfairness to Trump. And today, in the first actual news briefing, he reiterated some of this and claimed this long-running victimization of Donald Trump by the corporate media. He would not be fucking president if it weren't for the corporate media. They gave him so much free airtime last year. They always put him at the center of the stage. I mean, they did everything to give him this presidency. And sure, they were nominally in favor of Hillary Clinton, but they were unable to resist the opportunity to jack up their ratings and make more money by exploiting the Trump juggernaut. So to say he's at war with the media, a long-running war, it may have started after the election, Donald, but you got a free ride bigger than any presidential candidate in my lifetime. And so to see them try to rewrite history with their alternate facts, I mean, Kellyanne Conwoman, she's going to go down in the history comic books for that phrase. And so I just find this fascinating and ugly all at the same time. And so because of Trump's peak with the big networks, Sean Spicer's first daily briefing today, they called on everybody else in the press room before they got to the main networks. New York Daily News, Fox Business, Fox News Channel, the American Urban Radio Network, ABC Television, the BBC, Sky News, a bunch of fringe right-wing networks that are pro-Christian. And finally, the 13th question, Sean Spicer called on somebody from CBS, and then Jim Acosta from CNN was after that. But this is the kind of petty score-keeping and score-settling that was a hallmark of the Nixon administration, and it is back in vogue today. And because the media did get something wrong, A pool reporter claimed that the bust of Martin Luther King had been removed from the Oval Office when, in fact, he couldn't see it. It was behind a door, or he says maybe a Secret Service agent was standing in the way. So Trump is able to seize on one false item and then indict the entire coverage, including the honest claims about the crowd size that Trump felt motivated to lie about. So it's it's just mind-boggling to a guy like me who has been watching this for a long time. Marco Rubio has caved in and will vote for Rex Tillerson for Secretary of State. And at this point, I think I'm safe to predict that a couple of nominees will be delayed, like Betsy DeVos. But I believe Trump will get every one of his nominees, and this does not bode well for the Democrats' ability to resist a far-right Supreme Court nominee, which is going to be in the pipeline any day now. To his credit, Donald Trump today signed some documents declaring that the Trans-Pacific Partnership is dead. Now, it's been dead for months, so this is like dancing on the grave, but I'll take it because it does signal his intention not to pursue a deal along those lines. He also said that he is going to follow through on the practice or the protocols that were outlined in the original NAFTA agreement and notify the other parties, Mexico and Canada, that the U.S. wants to either withdraw or renegotiate. And on the face of it, that's a good move. We'll get to some questions about that in a moment. The other dramatic move that Trump made, he signed an executive order ordering a hiring freeze in the federal workforce except for the military. Now, I'm sure that makes a lot of people feel good. But let me just ask Trump about his biggest, claimed agenda item, that he wants to build a wall and seal the border. Well, what if he wants to hire workers to build that wall? What if he wants to hire more Border Patrol guards? His own freeze is going to get in the way. And as I've said before, these day one moves, like Obama, I'll close Guantanamo, like Clinton, I will allow gays to serve openly in the military, these generally don't go very well. But Trump's advantage here is that he's mostly nullifying things. His executive actions are not to produce something new. They are to, roll back something that already exists. That's much easier to achieve. But as to the TPP, I want to thank the folks at Public Citizen, Ralph Nader's group, and Lori Wallach, who's the director of their Global Trade Watch. She said that it's nice that the TPP is going to be buried. It couldn't have passed Congress anyway. But the question going forward is, will Trump's new trade policies create American jobs and reduce our trade deficit while raising wages and protecting the environment and public health here and in the nations, in the trading partners' nations? And Lori goes on to say that we have to watch carefully here because the announcement did not end the talks to establish the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, the Trade and Services Agreement, and the U.S.-China Bilateral Investment Treaty. And Lori Wallach also notes that if corporate elites are allowed to dictate how NAFTA is renegotiated, the deal could become even more damaging to working people and the environment than it is today. Keep that in mind, will you please? Well, as expected, a lawsuit was filed today and a complaint was filed on Friday. The lawsuit challenges Donald Trump and his status as a violator of the Constitution's Emoluments Clause. It bans payments from foreign powers to ones like Trump's companies, and this would include an order to stop Trump from taking payments from foreign government entities like patrons at Trump hotels and golf courses, loans for his office buildings from certain banks controlled by foreign governments, leases with tenants like the Abu Dhabi Tourism Office, a government enterprise. These are all very obvious, glaring conflicts of interest. And Trump just waves them away, saying, no, I'm above all that. So I am really happy for a couple of reasons, because this lawsuit has a team of eminent attorneys, Lawrence Tribe, Harvard, Erwin Chemerinsky, Dean of the Law School, University of California, Irvine, and a guy I'm a big fan of, Norman Eisen, an Obama administration ethics lawyer, and Richard Painter, a counterpart who served in the ethics department under George W. Bush. And there are a few others included. And the plaintiff in the case is the newly reformed group called Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. Now, I say newly reformed because I'm very pleased that David Brock has resigned as the chairman of the board of CREW. I've followed that agency since Melanie Sloan founded it in, 2003? And it was doing great work. And then David Brock muscled his way into CREW about a year and a half ago in advance of the 2016 campaign. Professor Eisen is now chairman of the organization. Painter is vice chairman, and that is a very good move. I'll also note I was really put off by the announcement that David Sirota, who has become a talented investigative reporter, has gone to work for David Brock. And Brock is continuing his political information control operations by hiring David Sirota to do investigative pieces on the Trump administration. Now, I think Sirota has done great work on Chris Christie and other issues, but his alliance with David Brock is quite troubling. The other complaint that has been filed by CREW is with the General Services Administration. There is a provision in the lease for the old post office building that Trump has turned into his Washington hotel that says that the lease cannot be held by somebody who is an elected federal official. There is a clear conflict there, and we'll see how that gets sorted out. Also, WikiLeaks is inviting whistleblowers to turn in Donald Trump's tax returns, because on Sunday, Kellyanne Conway finally flatly said that Trump will not be releasing his tax returns. Her argument is bullshit. She said people didn't care. They voted for him. And let me make this very clear. Most Americans are very focused on what their tax returns will look like and not his. Well, if you can get your fingers on Trump's tax returns, WikiLeaks will gladly receive them from you. The ethics challenges have been papered over for Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law. He has received a ruling from the Office of Legal Counsel that, despite clear precedents that ban a family member from serving in the White House, that they're going to let him do it. And this was greased by Jamie Gorelick. She was a Clinton administration deputy attorney general. She served with zero distinction on the 9/11 Commission. She was a real patsy for the government. And now she's in private practice, taking in $850 an hour to grease the way for Jared Kushner, who we're told will be given the portfolio of the Middle East, Israel, government partnerships with the private sector, and free trade. No conflicts for the Trump family there. Nah. And Jared Kushner, who is a deep Zionist, has no conflict in being assigned to handle the Israel portfolio. It's astounding. Today, the U.S. Supreme Court decided not to hear arguments over the strict photo ID law in Texas that we believe prevented as many as 600,000 registered voters from participating in November. The plaintiffs have challenged the law under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, and because there are only 8 justices on the court, John Roberts could see clearly that there would be no majority. And so they're basically punting this. It is the law continues on hold, but with the 9th justice being appointed soon, that could change at any moment. The New York Times public editor did a piece, and I've linked to it in the show file for today's podcast, examining why the editors at the New York Times decided not to run the unverified opposition research dossier on Donald Trump that included how he'd been compromised by the Russians and had the golden shower hooker event at the hotel in Moscow. And in general, I support the decision by journalists to withhold coverage on something that is unverified. And so Liz Spade goes through the details here of why the Times made its decision. But what's missing here is that there's no comparison to the way that the that the New York Times believed the unverified assertions of the CIA and other intelligence agencies about Russian interference in our election, and specifically that Russia hacked the DNC and the Podesta emails and then gave them to WikiLeaks. That is completely unproven, but it hasn't stopped the Times and other elements of the corporate media from reporting it as fact and embracing it, endorsing it. And I find that very troubling. I'll also note that a number of listeners picked up that in his final news conference, President Obama referred to the CIA claims as, I don't have the exact word in front of me, but he said that, there was not full confidence in them. And he, without really drawing attention to it, referred to the activities as leaks and not hacks. Was he trying to tell us something? Well, apparently he was trying to tell Trump something because he made a minor change in policy the day before he left office. And from it, I take that Obama was leaving Trump the message, don't do what I just did. And this relates to the final assault on Sirte in Libya that Obama carried out on Wednesday and Thursday before he left office on Friday. And the issue here is that Obama loosened the rules for that last assault and then tightened them back up for the future. Now, Trump can change all this. In many ways, I think this is superfluous. But Obama felt that he wanted to send a message that Trump should take great care not to kill civilians, but Obama had lifted the rules of engagement to protect civilians for this final raid on Libya. I don't get it. Also, on Saturday, there was the first drone strike in Yemen under the Trump administration, but we don't know if Trump actually authorized it or if it was a holdover from Obama. And finally today, the nation of Turkey is careening closer and closer to full dictatorship under Erdogan. And in very difficult debates that took place last week in the parliament in Ankara, there were actual ugly brawls that broke out. And in one case, a woman named Safak Pavi, a former UN diplomat who has a prosthetic arm, she suffered injuries to the socket of her arm when the prosthesis was removed, was yanked out. She had lost an arm and a leg in a train accident many years ago. So the lawmakers are allowing Erdogan to essentially become president for life, or at least for another 14 years. And this despite the fact that the claimed attempted coup in July has led to the dismissal of 100,000 employees of the state and the jailing of 40,000 other people. Now, I don't really believe there was a coup attempt. I think this was a charade. But can you imagine any coup where 40,000 people are involved? And I would encourage you to keep tabs on the changes in Turkey, because I'll bet Donald Trump is looking for clues and cues and tips on how he can try to pull off the same thing here and set up what I would call a dictatorship. Hey, thanks for listening to my News and Comment podcast today, all the way until you hear Roy Rogers. I'm Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling.